Hello, and welcome to the Joy CEO podcast. My name is Lori Pine, and I am your host. I am so excited to welcome to the show today my dear friend, Jennifer Kay, who you are going to love hearing from. Jennifer and I met during a certification class for our executive coaching program at Rutgers University. We met on Zoom, and as chance would have it, we became fast friends. Lucky us. And you are going to be delighted to hear her incredible career journey and just what she's doing today. So welcome to the show, my dear friend, Jennifer Kay.
Thank you, Lori. I am excited to be here.
So glad to have you. So I know all about you. I know the illustrious career you have had, but let's just tell, people listening just who you are and what you're all about.
Sure. So I am a 25-year veteran retained executive search partner turned executive coach. So I spent a very significant part of my career running a pharmaceutical and biotech executive search practice at a company called Stevenson Search Partners. And what I would say is I have significant amount of gratitude for that career. It gave me an opportunity to stay on the cusp of what was going on in the research and development world, as far as drug development is concerned, and to work with some really, really brilliant partners as clients. And quite frankly, during that career, not a single day or a single project was the same. And so the diversity of work and people that I was able to come across in that career was truly a gift. About 4 years ago, I decided that it was time to continue to grow in my own personal journey. And so that was when I signed up for our illustrious coaching certification. And that was the beginning of our story and the beginning of a capstone career for me.
Yes. And so what I really love about your story is that you were a bit on a different path when you were coming right out of your MBA, and you tried a couple of other things. And then this career really kind of landed in your lap, if you will. And you dove in, and you have some incredible experiences, incredible learnings, but some incredible relationships that have come out of this work that you've done. You want to say more about that?
Sure. And again, I think in any career, relationships are really the jumping point for providing us with new opportunities, providing us with rich perspective, and really coming across folks that we can learn and grow from. And so throughout my career, I was able to work with a couple of clients on some really, really interesting and novel business expansions that ultimately impacted millions of patients and families worldwide. And so I don't take that lightly. One of the clients, and this is kind of a really interesting story, and I want to tie this to leadership, Lori, because my career has really been based on how to bring leaders into organizations and ensure that they fit from a values perspective, they fit from a skills perspective, and that their story and their goals align with, where a client organization wants to go. And early on in my career, I got a phone call from Merck, which was a client that had been a long-term client, probably for 6 or 7 years at that point.
Merck as in Merck Pharmaceuticals.
Merck Pharmaceutical Company.
Global company.
Big global company.
Yes.
Yep. And at the time, they were working primarily in disease areas like cardiovascular and respiratory, migraine, diabetes. And I got this phone call, and the voice on the other end said, "We don't really do that much in oncology. We haven't been successful, but we have this asset and it looks like it's going to be promising. And we want you to come in and work with a gentleman by the name of Eric Rubin, who was really the architect of one of the first immunotherapy assets or drugs that was successful in the market, and built up his physician team. And that was in 2011. And at this point, that drug, which is called Keytruda, is in dozens and dozens of oncology disease areas, and really, really reframed, the oncology marketplace in terms of the immune system actually being able to be activated, right? To impact it, the immune system was harnessed against cancer, and patients who had run out of options were living longer.
Wow. So let me get this straight. This company had an asset, you called it, but it's essentially a drug that they were building.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to build out the thought leadership, the brilliance, the science that goes behind it, they intuitively knew that they needed the team of doctors and scientists that went behind that asset, that went behind that drug, in order to get it to be the drug that could go to market, that could go to the hospitals and the research centers to really make an impact and save lives, change lives through this immunotherapy that you're describing. And so they brought you in to build out that team, to help find these executives, do an executive search that would find these brilliant people and bring them in to impact their work the way that, as a company, they really wanted to.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because from that time period, we've been able to see the data build. So first, it was in melanoma, where, back in the day, patients with advanced melanoma survived, months, right? And then in lung cancer. And so I had the opportunity to work with Merck and Dr. Rubin to begin to build out the team that would then develop all of these future indications. So we're talking about, any cancer primarily that you can think about, whether it's, and the buzz around kind of what was building in the marketplace was electric. So it was a new day for pharma companies in terms of cancer treatments. And my job was to build relationships with the entire market of physicians, both from an academic center setting as well as other pharma companies, to find the folks that could actually develop all these indications. And, you bring up you brought up a comment and brought it back to relationships. And every year I would go to the world's largest oncology conference. And as we were building out, our searches expanded beyond just physicians to the folks that would go out and teach the doctors about, right, what these assets could be used for and how, to the folks that would work with the different ministries of health to gain access. And so, here I was kind of building these cross-functional teams, not just here in the US, but also in Europe and in other regions of the world, and building relationships. And every year I would go to ASCO, I would meet with all of the placements that we've made year over year over year to see how they were doing. And, I was always amazed at the one consistency across folks that I worked with in this field. And that was, they were focused on making an impact on health and wellness and disease. And most of these leaders were very limited in their ego.
Wow.
So really, really cool experiences.
So relationships was really the core of what you did. And so I do want to get a little bit nitty gritty to say, how would you find these people? How long would it take to nurture these relationships to actually get somebody placed and in a job?
Yeah. So it's interesting. An executive search firm has teams of researchers who really identify the individuals out there that are have a track record of success, and then really interview against leadership capabilities, right? And fit. So we had teams that were really out there looking at who had developed other comparable assets in the past and or was working on trying to break through this field of immunotherapy. But I think that the timing on it is as anything, right? Sometimes you have to catch somebody at the right time, because lots of folks that are involved in cancer research may be in multi-year programs where they don't want to make a move until they hit a milestone, right?
Right.
Or they might have kids in school in, XYZ country or region of the world. So some of it's timing.
Sure.
But I think that the real match is making sure that as an individual looks at a new opportunity, they're not just selling themselves. They're actually looking more holistically at the team that they'll be working with, at the organization, at the values, right? And ensuring that that resonates. And then also that the branding that's being put behind the organization and the company is actually true to what's being told to an individual. So we took a lot of extra care in ensuring that those conversations were had. And as a matter of fact, early on, before kind of the biotech boom, we would guarantee our placements for 2 years. So really standing behind the fact that we had really taken a deep dive with candidates and with the client to make sure that it would be a potentially strong fit. And we can get into that a little bit later, but that's part of the reason that I was so attracted to coaching.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to continue the journey and make sure that we could be a part of trying to maximize that individual's success.
Yeah. How fascinating that you could meet all of these amazing leaders, have these incredible conversations, build these relationships. And I know, because I know you personally, that many of those relationships are still in your life today. And, these people have gone on to have big impact. These assets have grown. And, as you talked about, Dr. Eric, have gone into the market and made incredible progress and changed lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, how incredible. All executives face uncertainty. What is a practical way for them to start to find clarity? Whether it's, do I move to a new job? Do I stay at the same job? How do I solve a problem? Whatever the unclarity is, how does it become clear?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We're in a very unique time right now where there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty, especially right now, as we're looking at changes to our healthcare system, not only here in the US, but around the world. And unfortunately, some of that clarity breeds uncertainty and ambiguity for these leaders. So I would say clarity doesn't come from just rushing into things, right? Whether you're rushing to try to solve a problem or you're running away from something because you are afraid that perhaps there won't be funding behind, the programs or projects that you're working on. So I like to say that clarity comes from slowing down and reflecting.
Which is so counterintuitive when you are a very busy executive who wants to achieve goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. So I often will ask executives, especially those executives that reach out because they are uncertain around either organizational factors or macroeconomic factors or, other factors that are potentially going to impact the programs that they work on or funding. And that is, let's really take a step back and kind of look at where you'd like to go directionally. And in order to do that, let's reflect back on a couple of things. So one is asking executives to think about a time where they were the most productive, where they were happy, where the environment that they were in gave them energy and joy, and who the people were around them at that time. And we often do a kind of a deep dive because the answers that executives give will reveal some themes around either the kind of impact that they want to have, the kind of culture that they thrive in, and what matters most to them. And then from there, we can really kind of try to get some more clarity around either a situation they're facing or even approaching their own careers.
Incredible. So sometimes it's just putting the right questions in front of people so that they can do that deep dive within themselves as though the answer is already within.
Yeah. And you know what's so crazy, Lori? When you think about reflection, and, I just gave you an example of, okay, tell me a time when you were happiest, right? But when you think about one's career, you can actually kind of break it down into chapters.
I love
right?
that. Say more.
Yeah. And so what I encourage leaders to do is, especially when they're looking at a new opportunity or thinking about a succession plan or a long-term strategy, where do I want to be in 5 years? Right.
Yeah.
So I encourage people, and it goes back to relationships, to take the chapters and make a short list of people who were present in those chapters. They could be mentors, they could be peers, they could be cross-functional partners, they could be direct reports, right? And to reconnect with them, especially when leaders call and they're flustered because of uncertainty. It's almost taking the time to be vulnerable, reconnect with your network, and listen, because those are the people that know you and will remind you of your strengths.
Yeah.
And also perhaps help you look at possibilities for yourself, especially when you're caught in fear.
Yes. Yes. And again, back to this theme of relationships and how powerful relationships can be in our life and in our career. So let's just say that you go back to these chapters, you're going to identify these 3 to 5 people from each stage. What would stop somebody from doing that, from reaching out?
Fear.
Yes, fear. And they're going to tell themselves a story. Like, they're not going to remember me. They're not going to remember the work that I did. Maybe they didn't even like me. Maybe they're too busy. All these things. Maybe I don't even have their correct cell phone number in my phone anymore. All these things. But the truth is, and you and I have talked about this, when we receive a call like that or a LinkedIn message like that, we're so happy to hear from the person and happy to give our time and to say hello and connect and schedule a coffee Zoom or whatever it might be. I mean, an in real life coffee meeting is like the real cherry on top, but just to connect over Zoom and hear how somebody's doing and have those conversations, it changes things for us too, to be able to be of service like that.
100%. And it's really interesting because you're talking to very established executives, and whether somebody's starting out in their career or has 30 years behind them, we all have our insecurities, right? And really, really kind of not allowing fear to narrow your perspective, right? And reaching into rekindling some of those relationships. And it's interesting. I've had a conversation recently with a client who is just an absolutely amazing, brilliant, global public health executive. And we talked about reaching out to some of the folks and in this individual's network. And what's the worst thing that happens?
They don't respond. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so if you reach out, let's just say to one of your, chapters to 5 people and 2 respond, 3 may not. And it's likely that they are busy or, they put it on the back burner. Oh, I'll respond to her later. Right. What a nice message to receive. I'll respond to them later. And then perhaps it gets pushed aside because there are other things going on. But that conversation that we do have may be that one conversation that sheds light and clarity or opens our eyes to other opportunities. So I always encourage folks not to shy away from reaching out to their network.
Yeah, even just the idea of that connection of somebody from that chapter who knew me then does something for my soul. It reminds me of that version of me. And it's really a place that you can go back to and pull from and say, ooh, I still have a little bit of that in me,
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that alone. So
yeah.
Oh my gosh, I do love that.
Yeah. It's also really interesting when folks now are going through the throes of the uncertain environment that we're in right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they think about, okay, well, what's going to happen to me if I lose, my job, for instance? I think there's a conversation I like to have with clients, which is, if you could reinvent yourself, what would that look like?
Yeah.
People tend to, in times of fear, cling to titles or familiar structures or narrow their perspective because they're worried about, not having a job. But I think that there's an opportunity here, which is about realigning with what matters most and kind of stepping into that next chapter with intention.
Yes. And honestly, how many conversations have you and I had about this for our own personal journeys?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We've been at the top of a mountain and had this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When you shift from one chapter to a whole new chapter, you leave some of those identities behind as
Mm-hmm.
you pave a path for something new. But not all is lost. In
Mm-hmm.
any way. We're still bringing all of our worth, all of our value, all of our knowledge and experiences with us, even though something ahead of us is unknown and the structure may be gone and the familiar people may be gone and the familiar routine of a day may be gone. The who we are doesn't leave. And that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a powerful reminder. And I know that I need people like you in my life to remind me of that.
Well, I was just about to say the same to you. And I think it was this time of year when you and I hiked up Mohawk Mountain.
Yes.
And we were having a conversation because for a while I wore 2 hats. I was a partner managing, a number of pharmaceutical companies and a book of business around executive search. But I was saying, okay, how now can I integrate executive coaching into the picture, right? And I was thinking of different ways to bring the two together. And we got up to the top of the mountain and the leaves were changing. And it was a gorgeous day and you could see for miles. And it was like a light bulb that went off, which was, oh my gosh, look at this perspective. It's wide open.
Wide open. No limitations.
And I think from that conversation, I was able to really put some thought into, okay, in this wide open world, given what I've done and the impact I want to have in terms of really getting in there with clients and ensuring that they look at short and longer term steps with some clarity, stability, right? And, and possibility to kind of really help me to get clear on the strengths, values, and an environment that I thrive in and where I could help others in the future.
Yes. And if we talk about how all that came to be, so Jen and I decided that we would literally run away from home for a few days, go to Mohonk Mountain House, because our boys are the same ages, and we were dropping our youngest off at college, and we were becoming empty nesters, quote unquote, for the very first time. And so we had this conversation, made this agreement. We're like, yeah, let's not just go home to an empty house. Let's meet and have a few days just together before we settle into this reality of what it's like to have both of our boys away for college. And so we did that. And so much came out of it, these aha moments. And both of us were coming off of quite a rough stretch through COVID, because this was 2022 when we were doing this. And we had been through COVID. Want to talk a little bit about what work was like for you during COVID and kind of what you had been through, and so where you were at when you were at the mountain top of Mohonk.
Yeah. So I think the two things I want to get back to Joy, which you were able to transition your business model from working through unsteady times into joy, right? Yes. And that lens just opened up so much. But as far as COVID, I don't know if you remember on the news, there was a conference in Boston, and it was a very large biotech company that had brought executives in from all over the world. And after that conference, dozens of these executives got sick. I had actually been in Boston meeting with clients, and one of those clients was Moderna. And I had just finished my first search for them. I had placed an SVP of development operations there, and I was meeting with what was then the former CMO, who's now the former CMO, to talk about where they were in their development of their vaccines and mRNA, and beginning to set the table for building up their executive team as they got into later stages of development. We weren't wearing masks yet. There was Purell on the desk. And I took a flight home with kind of a rough plan for the next 6 months, only to come down with COVID. And within a couple of days, we recognized what the world was coming to. And they were, basically on your marks, get set, go, let's build this team. So during COVID, my team and I must have done 24 placements, really beginning to take a company like Moderna from what was, early in the clinic, preclinical, to, getting it out to the world, their mRNA vaccine. So definitely a very interesting and robust time from a work perspective, something that I would never trade in terms of experience.
Yes, you were not at home watching Netflix during COVID. No. Neither was I. Neither of us had that experience. Yes. We were on the forefront of trying to make business happen. And your experience really made an impact, because as we all know, Moderna was really on the forefront of getting a vaccine to market to really help save lives. And that was their mission. No matter what controversy may be out there about vaccines or not, that was what they did. And that's ultimately what happened, and is people stopped dying. And so I so appreciate that perspective of you, that you were heads down, placing dozens of executives in roles so that all of that could come to market.
Yeah. And look, I think, it was obviously a team effort. And from a reflection standpoint, this was not the norm in terms of the roles that we were placing and the lift that we were asking folks to have. And the environment was really tough, right? Because you had a biotech mentality that all of the sudden, was hiring, hundreds and hundreds of, eventually a couple thousand employees. So there was a lot of key learnings from that time as well. And I think that was one of the motivating factors for me to say, okay, I've had this amazing chapter, but very often, especially with scientists or engineers or folks that have a very specialized track, right? There's some learning that comes with the pressure of meeting everyday goals. And that learning is, okay, how am I going to do this in the most efficient and effective manner? And that all comes back to people.
Yeah.
Right. And how do I take on a new challenge and be cognizant of building relationships in a steady fashion, of asking for feedback, of communicating, right? And really ensuring that you're pulling the thread through of high impact leadership while you're tackling problems. And that is not easy.
No, not easy. Not easy. And with that experience, that's what you continue to bring to clients today. Yes. And, as we think about growth patterns and strengths, how is it that you think about that and how people can become their best?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I think I was never a big believer in assessments. I always was very intuitive in my approach to the executive search world. And I think my intuition worked in that I've been able to maintain and retain long-term relationships. But I really began to delve deep into the science behind assessments, motivation, emotional intelligence, behaviors, right? Personality. And so in my practice now, where I'm either working with executives who are in transition or helping executives to integrate in new roles in their organization, succession, or folks that come in from the outside into a new organization, will very often set the table with some type of an assessment that makes the most sense. And really so that the individual understands themselves, that the organization has an understanding for whatever assessment and that we choose to utilize. And we use it as a baseline to understand not only the individual coming in, but also the people around them and where they fall from that assessment perspective. And to be cognizant of those differing traits and characteristics to maximize how we communicate, how we interact, and really open the dialogue from the get-go. We also spend a lot of time with the team, not just the hiring manager or HR, but also the leadership team around that individual and even some of their direct reports to understand and ensure that everybody's aligned in terms of what the expectations are and that the individual can really come in and while they're learning, they're picking kind of their short-term versus longer-term wins, and they're going back against their plan, their relationships, their interactions, and just kind of really making a very, very focused weekly, monthly, quarterly plan.
Yes. And I think that that's sage advice for anybody who's even just listening and may not have the support from their organization to do exactly that. Have those plans for yourself, have that ability to reflect, have that ability to go back and check on those relationships will really be critical in how you go forward.
Yeah. And to talk about the interactions that you have, right? Or that your team is having with perhaps one of your peers, who's interacting with your team. So not being afraid to talk about not only the wins, but the losses.
Yeah.
And I think one of the stories that stuck with me was actually an executive that we placed at Moderna. And what he would do at the end of every project was have a cake.
Hmm.
And he would have a cake both to celebrate wins, but even more importantly, to celebrate their loss and talk about what happened, what could we be doing better in the future, right? But not to treat it as, a slap on the hand, to actually encourage folks to try new things, right? Fail fast and learn versus an environment where you're punished for trying to innovate. So I love that.
Yeah, we're even going to celebrate and have cake over the things that didn't go so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. That creates a culture that we can actually speak up and expose things that aren't going well, as opposed to an environment where you're only allowed to say the good things and then there's cover up for the things that are failing.
Okay.
That can be a really corrosive environment. I'm actually coaching somebody right now in an environment like that, and it is incredibly challenging for her. So let's talk about joy. Let's talk about leaders stepping into joy during transition, because that can be a nerve-wracking time.
Yeah. So look, I think joy doesn't mean ignoring uncertainty, right?
No.
But it means anchoring yourself in what energizes you and really giving it meaning. It gives you meaning, right? You can anchor yourself in all of the woe is me that's going on in our world today. And it's just going to be, a whirling circle of negativity. But if an executive gets clear on their strengths, their values, and really tries to recreate the environments in which they thrive and understand their team and the environments that will help them to thrive, because we're not all the same, right? I may thrive in an environment where, I tend to talk out my thoughts, but I may have somebody on my team who's really, really quiet, right? And prefers to communicate in a different way. So ensuring that we're kind of catering to the team and how they want to be treated, not just how we want to be treated.
Right.
And kind of finding that sweet spot, if you will.
Yeah.
I also think that when an executive steps into what energizes them, it's easier to make choices that aren't driven by fear, right? And where they're not defensive, they're actually working offensively.
Yes. Yes. I often talk a lot about how joy is this profound and holistic sense of well-being and contentment. And when we are in a state of well-being and contentment, all of what you're saying is actually coming true. We know ourselves, we know our strengths, we know what energizes us, but we also have enough care of taking care of that and of ourselves that we can actually take action upon it. And that joy then becomes this strength for our leadership. And it's not just some fluff. And when we can lead from that space, it really can make a difference. There's a lot of metrics around the power of a joyous leader in terms of productivity and sales and customer satisfaction. And the metrics are profound. And so I agree entirely with what you're saying, but it takes, like you said, from the very start of this podcast, it takes that willingness to take a pause and a reflection to go inward and say, okay, where am I? How do I go back to myself and do a little bit of soul searching. Where was I the happiest? Where can I be the happiest? What do I bring to the table? Where am I going to be energized?
Yeah. And I think there's so many books out there now, Getting Happy, right? Finding Happiness, all sorts of books. But I think the one of the takeaways that I would have around that is you can choose to look at the world from a lens of scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
or you can choose to look at the possibilities.
Yes.
And that's kind of really where reinvention happens as leaders move out of their fear, but also where leaders inspire.
Yes. Yes. That's a beautiful, beautiful way to bring this all to life. So what I've kind of heard in this episode is we're going to reflect to find the clarity that helps us get out of uncertainty. We're going to use career chapters to help us reconnect and network back with our relationships. And all of that chatter in our head that may be negative that says, oh, they're not going to remember me. It's not true. Just take the action, connect back. If you get 1 or 2 out of 5, you're winning because you've made that contact. The third thing I heard was about strengths and growth. Get beyond those growth edges to keep yourself going, and then step into joy, because that's where you can actually start to thrive and become who you're meant to be as a leader. You go from scarcity to possibility thinking, and then who knows what's next for you.
Yeah.
How'd I do? Did I capture it?
Yeah, I think that you did capture it. And I think it goes really back to the basics, right? We learned as we grow and as we take on responsibilities that people carry with them different pressures and emotions. And we see that whether we're sitting in a restaurant, and interacting with a waiter or waitress, we see it online at a store, and we see it in our corporate environments. And having the space to kind of take a step back, reflect, whether you're looking for a new opportunity, taking on a new role, or in an everyday leadership position, it creates the space for possibility versus the mindset of kind of scarcity.
Yes. Yes. So if we take this kind of to a funny level, and this storied career that you have had, in what would have been the mind of maybe your 7-year-old when he went to parent-teacher conference night and told, what does my mommy do for a profession? He would have said, what?
My mommy just created a new cancer drug. So you had to bring that up. It is a funny story.
Yes.
We used to kind of, and this is from my childhood, right? Everybody came home from work, you sat around the table and everybody talked about their day.
Yes.
I carried that through to my children, and my oldest son came home and said, well, in class today, right, we talked about our parents, and I told them that my mom is developing a cancer drug. And so I was a little bit scared to go to parent teacher night and be addressed as Dr. K. But, I think in his mind, he knew I was getting gratification.
Yeah.
By just being in that industry, right?
Of course.
I wish I had the smarts to have developed.
Well, he's not that wrong. I mean, you were helping. You were putting the right people in the right places. I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I went to parent-teacher night and my child had said, well, my mom sells Coke. And so they were really expecting a drug dealer. So
that's hysterical. That's hysterical.
So out of the mouths of babes. So
exactly.
These boys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun.
Absolutely.
So fun. Well, Jen, a pleasure to have you with us. Is there any details you would like for listeners to know about you, where they can find you, more information about you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn with stevensonsearch.com.
Wonderful. What a delight to have you on. I'm sure you were a gift to so many who will listen today. And as always, just a gift to my heart and a joy to just be with. Such a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.